that.
Oh, I'm consenting. Okay, consent.
And we're rolling. Hey, everybody, it's Sean Murphy with 1455. Always excited to be back for another edition of the 1455 interview. The next few we're going to have are particularly relevant and timely because we have our November authors event Monday night at 7 p.m., which is a panel discussing crime writing, which will feature a bunch of awesome best-selling authors. More information about that at our website. But again, 7 p.m. Eastern time. And one of the participants in that discussion is with me today. Please welcome Jennifer Hillier. She writes about dark, twisted people who do dark, twisted things. Born and raised in Toronto and a proud Canadian, she spent 8 years in the Seattle area, which is where all her books are set. She loves her son, husband, the Seahawks, and Stephen King. Not equally, but close. She is the author of 6 novels, including Jar of Hearts, which won the Thriller Award and was shortlisted for the Anthony and McCavity Awards. Her most recent psychological thriller, Little Secrets, which I see behind her back there, was published on April 21st, 2020. Jennifer, thanks for being here. It's wonderful to meet you and have the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you for having me, Sean. It's nice to be here.
All right. Well, as we get ready for Monday, we will have our little palate cleanser here. I'm going to set the timer, as always, for 14 minutes, 55 seconds. Let's get it on. Jennifer, what is the first book that made you want to be a writer or a book that changed your life?
So I read a lot when I was from a very young age, and I started off with Nancy Drew, as a lot of, I think, mystery writers did.
Sure.
But when I was a teenager, it was when I started to really consume books, and there wasn't a YA category that I was aware of the way that there is now. So I read a lot of my mom's Sidney Sheldon books, and he was this really popular commercial writer back in the 80s. And there was a book called Master of the Game, which was about con artists. And it had like a love story that kind of rolled through it, and it was really well paced. And I can remember reading that book and thinking, I want to be a writer.
And that was all she wrote, or that was the beginning of all she did write.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a dishy book, and I just thought I could do that, and I thought it would be fun if I could do that.
Right on. Well, first time that author's been name checked. I always love when we get new blood. So I have a feeling from your bio, I might know the answer to this, but who would you say your most profound artistic influence is?
You know what? It's hard because the influences come from so many different places, and it changes from book to book. But if I was to identify a universal thing that inspires me, I'd probably say music in general, which I know is a wishy-washy answer, but when I hear a song, I can almost instantly conjure up a memory that's very specific to that song, where I was the first time I heard it, what was happening in my life at that time. And so when I'm trying to get into the groove of writing, what I put on my playlist is really important because it takes me into the headspace that I need to be. And so I would definitely say I couldn't write the way that I do if I didn't have music influencing me. And there's also song lyrics that kind of inspire me too. So definitely. I mean, 2 of my books are titled after songs. Creep, my first one, and Jar of Hearts. So 2 of my best titles are stolen from songs I've loved.
Which is not unique, and yeah, I mean, I totally relate to that. I've told people, and I don't think a lot of them believe me, that I'm probably more inspired by music and songs than I am by other writers, just because it's so, you read and each book takes a certain period of time, but music is just, ubiquitous and constantly with you.
And it's just there, and it takes me right back to that place that I was when I heard it the first time, and then I can conjure up all of those feelings, and it really does like bleed into the work.
Right on. I love it. Great. All right, so this is a good segue then. How about an album or movie, or both, that you recommend without reservation?
I would say The Shawshank Redemption, which I know is like a popular movie that everybody loves, but I think I've seen it 20 times. And I always get sucked in, and I think it transcends genres. I feel like when I watch it, it doesn't date. It's not a story that feels like when you watch it, that, oh, this is so old, or that doesn't hold up. Like, it holds up, and it just kind of, I love how the ending makes you feel that sense of hope and optimism after such a dark story. So I just, it's my favorite.
Right on. And beautifully cast, and of course, featuring one of your four loves, Stephen King.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember, I mean, I read that as part of Different Seasons when that paperback came out, which ages me, of course. But
ages and ages ago. And I actually think the movie was better than the story. And I never normally say that, right? Like as writers, we usually root for the book, but this is one of those things that they put on film and it just expanded.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a perfect cast never hurts. And that movie benefited from that tremendously. Okay, this is another impossible one, but it's still fun. If you could identify the best first or last line of any book ever, or in your opinion.
This is so hard because it's so hard. But I think I would probably, can I swear?
Of course.
Probably the first line of Andy Weir's The Martian, and it starts with, "I'm pretty much fucked."
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, so I'm already intrigued.
Pretty much fucked. So, you know, it just kind of like, there's no way you're not going to find out what happened and keep going. And it's just strong, impactful, very brief, relatable first line. So I like that. I like how the book opened.
No, hard to argue with that. Enough said.
Yeah.
How about an underrated author that you'd like to give a shout out to?
You know, it's funny because I was like, okay, underrated, you know, does that mean not popular? Does that mean didn't get their due? Does that mean, you know, so I kind of thought about it and I'm like, you know what, I would actually choose Shannon Kirk. She's a wonderful writer. She actually writes in a few different genres. She does gothic thrillers currently, but she's also written a really great YA book called Method, 1533, I think. And she's very poetic, and her books are very specific. In terms of like her voice, like you would know you're reading a Shannon Kirk book. And I just think that she deserves to be huge. I really do. And I'm all, you know, I just love her stuff so much. Such a huge fan.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing that. And I hope that does turn some people that are watching on to, and which is the whole point of the questions. So thank you for that. All right. Question that's very meaningful to me. Why have you not read Moby Dick? Or if you have, is there a classic that you've been meaning to get around to?
You know, I want to say that I tried reading Moby Dick in high school and never finished. Or maybe I skimmed enough to do the book report, but I don't remember anything about it. And I would say I probably am not reading it now because it's too big. Not that I don't, you know, like long books, but I don't know. I kind of missed my window, I think, to really dissect it. And now that I don't have to, then I just am not going to. But I think there's also the book that I regret not reading is The Outsiders. I've never read The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. And every so often I see a debate on Twitter that pops up about something to do with that book. And I'm like, you know what, if I read the book, I might actually understand what they're debating. But it seems to be still culturally relevant, you know, 50 years later.
Yeah, I recommend it. It's short. It's the anti-Moby Dick. You could probably read it in a couple of hours and move on. But I would recommend it.
I know, I really should.
I haven't read that in a long time, but I revisited Rumblefish, another one of her books, and that holds up pretty well. Very digestible, you know, easy to read, but also easy to see why they've endured in American culture for a lot of reasons. All right, let's make it about you for a second. If you could say, is there a single theme or topic that your work tends or seeks to address?
You know, lately it's been grief. I've been writing a lot of stories that involve grief and recovering from grief or a sense of loss. But overall, since I've written 6 books now, I would probably say I'm fascinated by what people do when they think nobody's looking. And I've been writing about that since my very first book. Like, I feel like we all, especially with social media, we all present ourselves a certain way in public. And we're taught to do that, and we should do that. But then when we're alone, I think sometimes we're completely different people. You know, we behave differently, we speak differently, we wear different clothes, you know, we style ourselves differently. And I want to know what people are doing when they think no one's watching. So I feel like my work has a bit of a voyeuristic theme to it, where we're kind of peeking where we shouldn't. But I know that I really want to see. So
yeah, the essence of kind of curiosity, which is the main impetus behind any creative act. Great answer. All right, so I usually combine the next two because I find that the answers have been pretty consistent. Not that that's the point of the questions, but
Right.
talking about writing routines and writer's block. Do you believe in either? And if so, how do you deal with them? Or what's your process, or do you have one?
I did very specifically have a process with the first few books that I wrote where I had to have my setup just so. I only ever wrote on a desktop computer, didn't like a laptop. Had to have a candle burning with a food smell. It had to be like an apple pie or cinnamon bun or something like that. And I'd be very private and I would write sometimes late at night. That was my groove. And then I had a baby, and then having a kid threw all of that out. Now, of course, candles are not safe when you have a small child. So there go the candles. And late at night, I'm wiped. And so now the only thing that I do on any given day is I have to get my words in before the day goes sideways. And it always goes sideways at some point. So I sit down, and before I do anything, I try to get some words out, because if I don't, I'll get distracted. I'll get sucked into Twitter. That's the only thing, but I don't have a routine like I used to. And I kind of miss it, to be honest.
Yeah, but I have to say, I want to give you props for, this series is partly designed to demystify, this notion of the writer as a solitary genius that, inspiration strikes and it's easier for some. And the fact that you have real world, like literal real world responsibilities, and you make it a point to write, for me personally is inspiring, because it reminds me that there are no excuses, and it's a luxury to be bored or to be blocked. You've just got to write through that. But
really
the fact that you have a baby, have a young one, and are still getting it done, way to go.
Thank you. And it feels hard. It felt hard before I had a baby, but it feels hard now. And so for any new writers, it's not as much, it's fun, but it's not fun all of the time. And you just kind of have to push through.
Right on. How about a setback you've experienced, artistic or otherwise, that, kind of helped, ironically or otherwise, shape the trajectory that you find yourself on now?
Yeah, there was a point where after my fourth book, which was released as an ebook original only, where I thought I might be done as a writer. I thought, my sales had declined. It didn't feel like I had any control over that. That was just what happened. I'd written 4 books, and each one kind of sold a little bit less than the last. And it was like, where do I go from here? And I thought, you know what, I might be done. And when I started writing, I only ever thought about publishing my first book. I never thought about it beyond that. And so I had written 4, and I thought, well, it's not like I've done nothing. But I then decided I had 1 book left in me, and I was going to take one more big swing at it. And I didn't have a contract. I didn't know where it was going to go. And I wrote Jar of Hearts from beginning to end. Didn't tell anybody I was working on it. Didn't tell my agent. Didn't tell the publisher. And then when I finished, because I think I had written it alone, without a deadline, without the pressures of people, what are you working on now? I was able to really just kind of stretch a little bit and enjoy the process again, which I hadn't for a while. And so that was my pivot into, the next stage of my career. But I very nearly, gave up.
Well, good thing you didn't, and good for you for, again, a very recurring theme that I think people are mystified by, but also refreshed to hear, which is that writers have doubt. And if you're not enjoying, and I've already said this so many times in the series, but it certainly comes from a very deep space. If you're not enjoying it, how do you expect someone to enjoy reading it? So there's got to be some love and joy in the process.
Exactly.
So define or explain, if you can, what literary success means to you.
Oh, literary success. Being able to write what I love without feeling compromised about it, telling the story how I want to tell it, having publisher support, it's so important. As writers, so much of our marketing and publicity falls on us, but if you don't have a publisher that's willing to push a little bit, it's very difficult to get traction and build a readership. And then a dedicated readership. I don't need to necessarily have, millions of people's reading me, although of course that's always the fantasy.
Sure.
But I love people who've said, oh, I've read your last book and I want to see what you have next. That means so much to me when you come back, right? And you want to see what I have next. And then really success, I define it as being able to pay the bills. Because as a writer, it's so hard to make money. And you do it for such a long time, typically. If you're not a breakthrough success from day one, you typically work really hard for a long time before you're able to make any income from it. that matters. And so being able to pay the bills, I consider that to be a success.
Absolutely. And I mean, a lot of writers don't even have that level of success.
Yeah. And that was me for a long time. You know, my writing income was just sort of income that got caught up on some things sometimes, but it was never anything it wasn't life-changing, you know, for a long time.
Right. Is there something that you wish you'd known as a writer 10 or even 20 years ago?
I wish I had the confidence to ask questions. When I was a new writer, I was nervous about all the things that I didn't know and really scared to ask questions. And, you know, nowadays I feel like it's easier because there's so many writers online that you can talk to.
Yeah.
But when I got started back in 2008, most people weren't on Facebook that I knew of at that point. I didn't know how to connect with other writers, and I didn't know how to ask questions. And then when I signed with an agent, I didn't want her to think I didn't know what I was doing. Although, of course, I don't know what I'm doing because I'm brand new. But I was nervous to bother her. And then when I got my first book deal, I had all kinds of questions, but I was afraid to be annoying. And so there were a lot of things I just didn't ask. And I that was kind of me for a good 4 books until I realized, you know what, this is stupid. Like I'm the person who cares most about my books compared to anybody. You know, everyone else that you work with has multiple authors they work with, but it's just me for me. So if I don't ask, what's the worst they can say? No, or here's the explanation, now go away. Like, so I wish I had asked. And so for new writers, if there's anything you're not sure about, ask.
Absolutely. And, you know, this theme comes up all the time, partly because it was the inspiration to start 1455. But I think what gets reinforced in all of these discussions is this notion of community, being a part of one, supporting one, and seeing the ways both as artists, but as humans. There's solidarity. Most writers, in my experience, and most of the people I've talked to, are generous. They have time. They want to help others. And if you're able to surround yourself or seek out that type of community and contribute to it, the payback is so huge.
So huge. And, you know, and friendship is everything too, you know. And also to that would be another piece of advice I would give is make friends. You know, don't be afraid to let people in and to talk honestly about your experiences, because it's a hard business. And if you don't have your friends to rely on, you might not make it through some of the tough times.
Hear, hear. You have done unbelievably well. We are almost exactly on time. So the last question, do you have a 1 minute or so exhortation for a beginning writer looking for advice?
I do. Okay, I do. And this is such a hard question because how do you boil it down when there's so much to say? But
yeah,
first, write the book that you want to read. Okay, you have to want to love that story, and you have to want to, as a reader, dive in. Finish your work. You know, it doesn't matter how great your half-finished manuscript is. You have zero chance of getting a readership or getting it out there in the world until you have finished it. So finish your work. Learn to take criticism, but also learn what criticism to ignore and throw away, because not everything is meant for you. And you have to learn to filter what you need to know and what you don't need to know. And accept that the only part of the process that you can control is the writing of the book. Everything else, what people think of you, what people think of your work, reviews, sales, most of that is outside your control. So when it's you and the page, that is your time, and throw yourself into it and just really accept that this is the part that is yours. All the rest of it becomes everybody else's.
What a great answer. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you so much for just a generous, inspiring. I'm super inspired just hearing you talk about craft and how obvious, how important it is to you. Folks, if you're watching this now, tune in Monday. You can hear more of this. And Jennifer, please let those watching know, how can they find you online? What's your website or a way to look you up?
I'm kind of everywhere. It feels like.
Good answer.
No, JenniferHillierBooks.com is my website, and I'm on Twitter at Jennifer Hillier, Instagram at Jennifer Hillier Books, and Facebook at Jennifer Hillier Books. And I'm not always active on all of them at the same time, but I try to show up every day somewhere.
Right on. Well, and folks, I will put that information. We'll put this on our website as always, and on our YouTube page, and that will be in the description. So no worries if you didn't know how to spell that. I'll have it all in there. So Jennifer, Thank you so much. Wonderful talking to you. And I look forward to talking to you in like 72 hours. So
I will see you Monday.
Same bat time, same bat channel. I'll talk to you in a couple of days.
Love it.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.